The dinner rush at Bella Notte started the same way it always did, with the smell of garlic bread warming in the oven, the clatter of silverware being sorted into bins, and the low murmur of early diners settling into their booths. I tied my black apron around my waist, checked that my notepad and pen were secure in the pocket, and took a breath that didn't quite fill my lungs the way it used to. My name is Emma Reyes, 24 years old, 2 jobs, 1 studio apartment in a neighborhood where the rent was cheap because the locks didn't work and the sirens sang you to sleep every night. I'd been waitressing at Bella Notte for 18 months, long enough to know which customers tipped well, which tables turned over fastest, and exactly how to smile so it reached my eyes even when exhaustion had settled into my bones like wet concrete. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching. I love hearing from you. The restaurant itself was beautiful in that old-world Italian way. Exposed brick walls, strings of warm Edison bulbs overhead, red-checkered tablecloths that got replaced every night whether they needed it or not. It sat on the corner of a busy street in downtown Chicago, the kind of place where tourists came for authentic pasta, and locals came because they'd been coming for 30 years and saw no reason to stop. I worked the floor with 2 other servers. Marcus, who was putting himself through law school and had the kind of optimism I'd lost somewhere around my sophomore year of community college, and Jen, a single mom in her 40s who worked doubles most days and never complained even though I knew her feet hurt as badly as mine did. Tonight felt different from the moment I walked through the staff entrance. Nothing I could name exactly, just a heaviness in the air, like the pressure drop before a thunderstorm. I dismissed it as exhaustion. I'd worked a 6-hour shift at the coffee shop that morning, then come straight here. My body was running on fumes and the kind of determination that came from knowing rent was due in 5 days and I was still $200 short. Table 12 just sat down, Jen said, passing me with a tray of appetizers balanced on her shoulder. Looks like they're celebrating something. Wedding anniversary, maybe. I glanced over. A couple in their 60s, holding hands across the table, smiling at each other like they shared a secret the rest of the world would never understand. Something in my chest ached watching them. That kind of easy affection, built over decades. I wondered what it felt like to be known that completely by another person. I've got them, I said, grabbing menus. The evening unfolded in its predictable rhythm. I took orders, delivered food, refilled water glasses, smiled until my face felt like a mask I couldn't remove. The couple at table 12 ordered the special and split a tiramisu for dessert. A family of 4 at table 8 let their children run wild, until I nearly tripped over a 7-year-old doing laps between the booths. A businessman at the bar nursed a whiskey and worked on his laptop, barely acknowledging my existence when I asked if he needed anything else. It was ordinary, exhausting and ordinary. Until I saw him. He stood across the street, partially hidden by the shadow of a closed storefront, just standing there, watching. He wore a gray hoodie despite the September heat, hands shoved in his pockets, face mostly obscured but tilted toward Bella Notte's front windows, toward me. My hands went cold. The water pitcher I'd been holding suddenly felt impossibly heavy. I'd seen him before, 3 times in the past 2 weeks. Once outside the coffee shop where I worked mornings, standing by the bus stop even though no bus came for 20 minutes, and he never got on one. Once near my apartment building, leaning against a lamppost, scrolling through his phone but his eyes tracked me as I passed. And once at the grocery store, in the cereal aisle, reaching for a box on the shelf beside mine, close enough that I could smell cigarette smoke on his clothes. Each time, I'd told myself it was coincidence. Chicago was a big city, but neighborhoods overlapped. People shopped at the same stores, took the same routes. It didn't mean anything. But now he was here, outside my workplace, just watching. "Emma? You okay?" Marcus appeared at my elbow, his friendly face creased with concern. I forced myself to look away from the window, forced my hands to stop shaking enough that I could set down the water pitcher without spilling it. "Yeah, fine, just tired." He followed my gaze to the street, but the man in the hoodie had shifted deeper into the shadows. Probably looked like nothing from Marcus's angle. Just another person waiting for a bus or a ride or whatever normal explanation I desperately wanted to believe. "You sure? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm sure." The lie tasted metallic. "Just need to eat something. Low blood sugar." Marcus accepted this with a nod, already moving toward his own tables, And I stood there for a moment longer, staring at that spot across the street where the man had been. Where he probably still was, just harder to see now. The rational part of my brain supplied all the reasonable explanations. Coincidence, paranoia, too many true crime podcasts playing while I studied late at night. But the part of my brain that had kept humans alive for millennia, the ancient instinct that could smell danger before it had a name, was screaming. Something was wrong. Someone was watching me, and I had no idea what to do about it. The rest of my shift crawled by. Every time I moved near the windows, I felt exposed, visible. Like prey caught in a clearing with nowhere to hide, I started taking longer routes between tables, staying toward the interior of the restaurant, away from the glass. Jen noticed but didn't comment, probably chalking it up to me avoiding the family with the running children. By 9 o'clock, the dinner rush had thinned to just a handful of lingering tables. That's when he walked in. I'd seen him before too, but in a completely different context. He came to Bella Notte every Thursday night. Always alone, always requested the corner booth in the back, always ordered the same thing, linguine with clam sauce and a glass of Chianti. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp jawline, straight nose, eyes so dark they looked black in the restaurant's dim lighting. He wore expensive suits that fit too perfectly to be off the rack, and when he moved, people got out of his way without seeming to realize they were doing it. His name was Dante Moretti. I knew because I'd heard the owner, Mr. Castellano, greet him once with the kind of deference usually reserved for visiting dignitaries or people you were terrified of disappointing. I suspected what he was, what he had to be, given the way Mr. Castellano treated him, the way other diners glanced at his table, then quickly looked away, the way men in dark suits sometimes sat at the bar, nursing drinks they never finished, watching the room with the alertness of trained guard dogs. But suspecting and knowing were different countries, and I had no intention of crossing that border. I took his order, brought his food, refilled his wine exactly once, and collected my tip always exactly 30%, always in cash. We barely spoke beyond the necessary pleasantries. He seemed to prefer it that way. Tonight, though, something was different. Dante settled into his usual corner booth, but his attention wasn't on the menu I'd placed in front of him. It was on me. Not in the leering way some men looked at waitresses, like we were part of the scenery they'd paid to enjoy. This was different, focused, assessing. Like he was cataloging information, noting details, filing them away for future reference. I approached his table with the water pitcher, hyper-aware of how my hands still hadn't stopped trembling completely. "Good evening, Mr. Moretti. Can I start you off with your usual?" "Emma." His voice was low, accented in a way that suggested Italian was his first language, even though his English was perfect. "You look distressed. Is everything all right?" The question caught me off guard. In 18 months of serving him, we'd never exchanged more than 10 words beyond order-taking. Now he was asking about my emotional state like it mattered to him. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Just a long day. I'll put in your order. You keep looking at the window." Not a question. An observation delivered with the certainty of someone who missed nothing. "At someone across the street. This is the 4th time in the past hour you've checked that same spot." My throat went tight. Of course he'd noticed. Men like Dante Moretti noticed everything. It was probably how they stayed alive in whatever world they inhabited outside of Thursday night dinners at Italian restaurants. "It's nothing," I managed. "Just thought I saw someone I knew." "Lying doesn't suit you." He leaned back against the booth, still watching me with that unsettling intensity. "You're frightened. Have been since approximately 8:45 when you first spotted whoever is out there. Your hands are shaking. You've been avoiding the windows. And unless I'm mistaken, you've been debating whether to tell someone or handle it yourself." Every word was accurate. Terrifyingly accurate. "I don't know what you're talking about." Another lie, thinner than the first. Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and I tensed, some primal part of my brain screaming weapon, but he only pulled out his phone. He typed something quickly, then set it face down on the table. "Someone is making you uncomfortable," he said quietly. "Someone outside. I'd like to help, if you'll allow it." "Why?" The question came out sharper than intended. "Why would you care if some waitress is having a bad night?" Something flickered in his expression. Not offense, more like recognition. like I'd said something he understood at a bone-deep level. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Because men who frighten women from the shadows are cowards, he said simply. And I don't tolerate cowards in my city. My city, not the city, my city. The casual possessiveness of that statement confirmed every suspicion I'd had about exactly what Dante Moretti was. I should have walked away. Should have thanked him politely and declined whatever help he was offering, because accepting favors from men like him came with prices that weren't always clear until you were drowning in debt you couldn't repay. But the man in the gray hoodie was still out there. I could feel him watching, even though I couldn't see him from this angle. And the terror that had been building in my chest for 2 weeks suddenly felt suffocating. Gray hoodie, I heard myself say. Across the street, by the closed pharmacy. He's been following me. Coffee shop, grocery store, my apartment building. This is the 4th place he's shown up. I thought maybe I was being paranoid, but you're not paranoid. Dante's voice had gone cold, flat in a way that made my skin prickle. You're being hunted. There's a difference. The word hunted made everything inside me go still and sharp. I don't understand why, I whispered. I'm nobody. I work 2 jobs, live in a terrible apartment, barely make rent most months. There's nothing special about me. Why would anyone? That's not a question you need answered right now. He stood, and the movement was fluid, controlled, like a predator uncoiling. Right now, you need to trust me. Can you do that? Every instinct I had screamed that trusting a man like Dante Moretti was dangerous, that his world was violence and power and consequences I couldn't begin to imagine, that whatever protection he offered would come with hooks buried so deep I'd never work them free. But the alternative was walking out of Bella Notte alone at the end of my shift, into the dark, with a stalker waiting somewhere in the shadows. So I made a choice. Maybe the wrong one. Maybe the only one available. Yes, I said. I can trust you. Dante made a phone call I couldn't hear, speaking in rapid Italian with his back half turned toward me. When he finished, he returned to his booth and did something I'd never seen him do before. He smiled. It was slight, barely there, but it transformed his entire face from intimidating to something approaching human. Sit down, he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. You're going to take your break now. 15 minutes. Right here where I can see you, and anyone watching can see me seeing you. I can't just... Mr. Castellano won't object. Again, that absolute certainty. Sit, Emma, please. I sat, because what else was I going to do? The booth felt too intimate suddenly, like crossing an invisible line I'd carefully avoided for 18 months. This close, I could see details I'd missed from a professional distance. The faint scar along his jawline, the silver threading through his dark hair at his temples, the way his hands rested on the table, relaxed but ready, like even sitting still, he was prepared for violence. Tell me about him, Dante said quietly. Everything you've noticed. When you first saw him, where, what he was doing. Details matter. So I told him. About the coffee shop 2 weeks ago. The grocery store 5 days later. My apartment building 3 days after that. Tonight, across the street from Bella Notte. How he never approached directly, just watched. How he seemed to know my schedule, my routines. How he always wore that gray hoodie, hood up, face partially hidden. Dante listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, processing. You live alone? He finally asked. Yes. Building security? There's a front door that's supposed to lock. Usually doesn't. His jaw tightened. Anyone who might have reason to target you? Ex-boyfriend, rejected advance, workplace conflict? I thought about it honestly. No ex-boyfriends. I don't date. Haven't had time or energy for it. No rejected advances that I remember. And I get along fine with everyone here. No one from your past? Family issues? Old grudges? My family is complicated. The understatement of the century. But they're in Texas. I haven't talked to them in 3 years. This feels different anyway. More random. Like he picked me for reasons I'll never understand. Dante nodded slowly, then pulled out his phone again. He showed me the screen, a photo, slightly blurry but clear enough. A man in a gray hoodie, face partially visible, standing exactly where I'd seen him across the street. "That's him," I breathed. "How did you—" "I have people who watch things for me." He pocketed the phone. "They took this photo 6 minutes ago. We're running facial recognition now. By the time your shift ends, I'll know who he is, where he lives, and why he's decided you're interesting." The casual efficiency of that statement should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something loosen in my chest. Someone was taking this seriously. Someone believed me. After 2 weeks of trying to convince myself I was overreacting, being dramatic, letting paranoia get the best of me, here was confirmation that my instincts were right. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me yet." His eyes met mine, dark and steady. This kind of attention doesn't usually end well if left unaddressed. Stalkers escalate. They go from watching to approaching to taking. You understand what I'm saying? I understood. The thought made my stomach turn. What do I do? "Tonight, you finish your shift. When you leave, one of my people will be waiting outside to drive you home. Don't argue," he added when I opened my mouth to protest. "It's non-negotiable. Tomorrow, we'll have a more detailed conversation about what happens next. But for tonight, you're not walking out of here alone. Clear?" It should have felt controlling. Should have triggered every alarm bell I'd carefully calibrated after watching my mother accept help from men who used generosity as chains. But Dante wasn't asking to come home with me, wasn't demanding my phone number or access to my apartment. He was simply ensuring I got from point A to point B safely. "Clear," I agreed. He nodded once, satisfied. "Good. Now, about my dinner order." The front door of the restaurant opened. I glanced over automatically. Professional reflex, checking if it was a new customer I'd need to seat. It was him. The man in the gray hoodie stood in the doorway. For the first time, I could see his face fully. Mid-30s maybe. Unremarkable features. The kind of person you'd pass on the street and forget immediately. Except for his eyes. They found me instantly. Locked on with an intensity that made my blood run cold. He smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who'd been hunting prey and just cornered it. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Every muscle in my body had locked down, primal fear overriding rational thought. He was inside now. Inside the restaurant, inside my safe space. And he was walking toward me with that horrible smile, navigating between tables with the confidence of someone who'd already decided how this ended. Then Dante stood. The movement was smooth, controlled, but it changed everything about the atmosphere in the restaurant. Conversations faltered. People looked up. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dante positioned himself between me and the approaching stalker. Not aggressively, not overtly threatening. Just standing there, a wall of expensive suit and controlled violence. "That's close enough," Dante said quietly. The stalker stopped. His smile faltered, confusion flickering across his face. He'd been focused on me so intently he hadn't noticed the man in the corner booth. Hadn't calculated that approaching me meant approaching someone else's territory. "I'm just here for dinner," the stalker said. His voice was higher than I expected, reedy, with a slight tremor that might have been nervousness or excitement. "Heard good things about this place." "The restaurant is full," Dante replied. "No tables available. I can wait at the bar." "No." "Flat. Final. You'll leave. Now." The stalker's eyes slid past Dante to me. I was still frozen in the booth, hands gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles had gone white. "Don't look at them," Dante said softly. But somehow the quiet words carried more weight than shouting would have. "Look at me." The stalker's gaze snapped back to Dante, and whatever he saw in Dante's face made his already pale complexion go ashen. "I don't want trouble," the stalker said, taking a step back. You were just leaving." Dante's hand moved slightly, adjusting his jacket, and I caught a glimpse of something dark against his ribs. A weapon. Concealed but undeniably there. "And you won't be coming back. Not here, not to the coffee shop on 5th Street, not to the apartment building on Maple. You understand what I'm telling you?" He knew. Somehow Dante already knew all the places this man had followed me. The stalker swallowed hard, nodded once, then turned and nearly ran for the door, stumbling over his own feet in his haste to escape. The door swung shut behind him. The restaurant slowly returned to normal, conversations resuming, though several people were still glancing toward our booth, with expressions ranging from curiosity to fear. Dante sat back down across from me like nothing had happened. "Emma," he said, gently, "you can let go of the table now. You're safe." I looked down at my hands. My fingers had cramped from gripping so tightly. I forced them to release, flexed them until circulation returned in painful tingles. "He was inside," I whispered. "He came inside. And now he's gone." Dante's voice was steady, grounding. "And he won't come back. I promise you that." "How can you promise that?" "Because I just made it very clear what the consequences would be if he does." He leaned forward slightly, voice dropping even lower. "Men like that are predators, Emma. They choose targets they perceive as vulnerable. Alone. Easy. The moment they realize their target has protection, has someone willing to stand between them and harm, they move on to easier prey." The psychology of it made horrible sense. But one detail snagged in my mind. "You knew where I lived, where I work in the mornings. How?" He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "I notice things. You mentioned the coffee shop once to another server, the apartment building. I may have asked Mr. Castellano where his staff lived after you'd served me the first time. He told me most of his employees are in the Maple Street area because the rent is cheap. That's..." I stopped, unsure what word I was looking for. Invasive? Protective? Disturbing? All of the above? "I apologize if it feels like an invasion of privacy," Dante said, and he actually sounded sincere. "In my line of work, knowing details about people in my sphere of influence is necessary. But I understand that from your perspective, it's concerning." Sphere of influence. Another carefully chosen phrase that confirmed exactly what he was without saying it directly. "Your line of work," I repeated. "Which is complicated." He smiled again. That slight, barely there expression. "And probably better discussed somewhere other than your workplace. But Emma, I want you to understand something." He waited until I met his eyes. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly. "I'm not interested in controlling you or limiting your choices. What I am interested in is ensuring you're safe. That man who just left has been stalking you for weeks. That's unacceptable, and it's not going to continue. Whether you accept my help long-term or not, this specific threat ends tonight." "Why?" The question I'd asked before, but needed answered. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Dante was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant, seeing something beyond the restaurant walls. "Because 3 years ago," he finally said, "my younger sister was stalked by a man who escalated from watching to approaching to forcing his way into her home. I was in Italy handling business. By the time I got back to Chicago, she was in the hospital, and the man responsible was in the wind." His hands had curled into fists on the table. When he noticed, he deliberately relaxed them. "I found him eventually," Dante continued, voice flat now, emotionless. "Made sure he understood the consequences of his actions. But I was too late to prevent her trauma, too late to protect her when it mattered." His eyes refocused on me. "I won't be too late again, not when I have the power to intervene, not when someone needs help that I can provide." The raw honesty of that admission settled between us. This wasn't just about me. This was about his sister, about guilt, about a man trying to rewrite history by changing the present. I should have been wary of being someone's redemption arc, should have recognized that his motivation was complicated, tangled up with past trauma and current power. But sitting there in that corner booth, looking at a man who just chased away my stalker with nothing more than his presence and a promise of consequences, I couldn't find it in myself to care about the complexity of his motivations. He'd helped me. That was enough. "Okay," I said quietly. "I'll accept the ride home tonight. And tomorrow, we can talk about what happens next." Something in his expression softened. "Good. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for noticing." The words came out rougher than intended. Most people don't notice. Or they do and decide it's not their problem. "It's my problem now," Dante said simply. "And I take care of my problems." Mr. Castellano appeared at our table, wringing his hands with the nervous energy of someone who'd just witnessed something they didn't fully understand but knew was significant. "Mr. Moretti, I apologize for that man's intrusion. If I'd known..." "It's handled, Sal," Dante waved him off. Emma is going to take the rest of the night off. Paid. Full shift. And starting tomorrow, you're going to add security at the front. Someone who can screen customers before they get inside. I'll send recommendations. Of course. Whatever you think is best. Mr. Castellano turned to me, his weathered face concerned. Emma, are you all right? Do you need anything? I'm okay, I managed. Just shaken. Go home. Rest. We'll see you tomorrow if you're up for it, or take a few days if you need. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Dante stood, placed several bills on the table, far more than his usual meal cost, and gestured for me to precede him out of the booth. My car is outside, he said. Black Mercedes, driver named Marco. He'll take you home and ensure the building is secure before leaving you. Tomorrow afternoon, I'll send someone to collect you. We'll have lunch and discuss next steps. Is 2 o'clock acceptable? It felt surreal, being given instructions like this. But I was too exhausted, too emotionally wrung out to argue. 2 o'clock is fine. We walked to the front entrance together, true to his word. A black Mercedes idled at the curb, driver behind the wheel. Dante opened the back door for me, a gesture so old-fashioned it would have been charming in any other context. Emma, he said before I could climb inside. That thing I said in there? About looking at me instead of them. I paused, met his dark eyes. That applies going forward too. He continued quietly. Whatever threatens you, whatever makes you afraid, you look at me instead. Because I promise you, nothing is going to hurt you while I'm breathing. Understood? The intensity of that vow made my throat tight. This was more than a simple offer of help. This was a declaration. A line drawn in whatever sandmen like Dante Moretti measured their territory in. Understood, I whispered. He nodded once, satisfied, then closed the door gently and stepped back. Through the tinted window, I watched him stand there on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching until the car pulled away from the curb and merged into traffic. Only then did I let myself shake. Really shake. The adrenaline crash hitting like a physical wave. Marco glanced at me in the rearview mirror but said nothing, professional enough to pretend he didn't notice the tears, streaming down my face. I'd been stalked for 2 weeks. Tonight, that stalker had finally escalated, had finally gotten bold enough to approach me directly, and a man I barely knew had stepped between us without hesitation. Tomorrow would bring complications. Questions about what Dante Moretti wanted in exchange for his protection. What strings were attached to help offered by someone who clearly operated outside the law. But tonight, driving through Chicago's dark streets toward an apartment with broken locks and thin walls, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Safe. Even if that safety came with teeth. I didn't sleep that night. Marco had walked me to my apartment door, checked every room with the thoroughness of someone who'd done this before, then positioned himself outside in the hallway. When I'd protested that he didn't need to stay, he'd simply said, "Mr. Moretti's orders, miss," and settled against the wall like he planned to grow roots there. So I'd locked my door, the flimsy chain lock that wouldn't stop a determined child, let alone a grown man, and sat on my second-hand couch in the dark, watching shadows move across the ceiling and replaying the night over and over. The stalker's face, that horrible smile, the way he'd walk toward me like he had every right, and Dante, standing between us. Don't look at them, look at me. I pulled my knees to my chest, wrapped my arms around them, and tried to make sense of what had just happened to my carefully controlled life. Because 24 hours ago, I'd been Emma Reyes, invisible waitress, working 2 jobs, and drowning in community college debt and the kind of poverty that was exhausting but manageable. Lonely but safe. Now I was Emma Reyes, protected by a man whose last name I recognized from news articles I'd tried not to read too carefully. Articles about organized crime and federal investigations and bodies found in the Chicago River. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Unknown. Number. This is Dante. Marco confirms you're secure. Try to sleep. I'll see you at 2 p.m. tomorrow. DM. I stared at the message for a long time. The fact that he had my number shouldn't have surprised me. Men like Dante Moretti had access to information most people couldn't imagine. But the courtesy of identifying himself, of not assuming I'd recognize an unknown text, felt oddly considerate. I typed back, "Thank you for tonight. For everything." The response came within seconds. "You don't need to thank me. Sleep well, Emma. I didn't sleep well. I barely slept at all. But I did feel safer knowing Marco was outside my door. Knowing that somewhere in this vast city, Dante Moretti was making sure the man in the gray hoodie understood exactly what would happen if he came near me again. Morning arrived with pale sunlight cutting through my apartment's single window. I'd called out sick from the coffee shop the first time in 18 months I'd missed a shift. My manager had been understanding, which made me suspect Mr. Castellano had already called her. Word traveled fast in neighborhoods like this, especially when it involved people like Dante Moretti. I showered, changed into the nicest clothes I owned that weren't my work uniforms, dark jeans, a cream-colored sweater that had been expensive 3 years ago, when my life had looked different, and tried to do something with my hair that didn't scream disaster victim. At exactly 1:45, there was a knock at my door. I checked the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway, early 30s, professionally dressed in dark slacks and a burgundy blouse, hair pulled into a sleek ponytail. She was beautiful in that polished, put-together way I'd never managed to achieve. "Miss Reyes?" Her voice carried through the door. "My name is Sophia, Mr. Moretti sent me to collect you for lunch." I opened the door cautiously. Sophia smiled, the expression warm and genuine, and extended her hand. "It's nice to meet you. I've heard good things." "You have?" I shook her hand, confused. "Dante mentioned you were kind even when you were terrified last night. That you trusted him when you had no reason to. He values that." She glanced down the hallway. "The car is downstairs whenever you're ready." I grabbed my purse, a worn canvas bag that had seen better days, and followed her down 3 flights of stairs that smelled like old cooking oil and something I didn't want to identify. Sophia navigated them in heels without seeming to notice the sketchy lighting or the graffiti on the walls. The same black Mercedes from last night idled at the curb. Different driver this time, older, with silver-threaded hair and the bearing of someone military. He nodded at me but didn't speak. Sophia slid into the back seat beside me. As we pulled into traffic, she turned with that same warm smile. "I know this must be overwhelming," she said, "being pulled into Dante's world without much warning or explanation. But I want you to know that he's genuinely trying to help. He's not always great at expressing it in ways that don't feel controlling, but his intentions are good." "You know him well?" I asked carefully. "He's my cousin. I've known him my entire life." She adjusted her seatbelt. "Watched him go from a idealistic kid who wanted to be an architect to, well, what he is now. The path wasn't easy. But underneath all the power and reputation and fear people feel around him, he's still someone who cares deeply about protecting people who can't protect themselves." The phrasing was deliberate. People who can't protect themselves. Like me. The waitress with broken door locks and a stalker she hadn't known how to stop. The question came out before I could stop it. He mentioned Juliana. Sophia's expression softened with something that looked like old grief. "She's okay now. Lives in California with her husband and their daughter. But what happened to her changed Dante. Made him more intense about these situations. When he sees someone vulnerable being targeted, it triggers something in him. A need to fix what he couldn't fix for her. So, I'm his redemption project," I said quietly. "No." Sophia's voice was firm. "You're someone who needs help that he can provide. That's different. Dante doesn't do anything purely for emotional reasons. If he's protecting you, it's because he's decided you're worth protecting. That you matter. Trust me, Emma. He doesn't make that decision lightly." We drove through downtown Chicago, past streets I recognized and then into neighborhoods I didn't. Gradually, the buildings got nicer, the cars more expensive, the people walking by better dressed. Old money areas where generational wealth lived in historic brownstones and modern high-rises with doormen. The car stopped in front of a restaurant I'd only seen in magazine articles. The kind of place where reservations required knowing someone who knew. Someone where the wait list was months long, where a single meal cost more than I made in a week. "This is too much," I said, panic rising in my chest. "I can't afford—" "You're not paying," Sophia interrupted gently. "You're Dante's guest. And before you argue, understand that refusing would insult him. In his world, providing hospitality is important. Let him do this." The driver opened my door. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, feeling completely out of place in my Target jeans and 3-year-old sweater. Dante waited inside the entrance, somehow looking both perfectly at home and slightly out of place. He wore charcoal slacks and a black button-down. No tie, the collar open just enough to show the gold chain he always wore. When he saw me, his expression shifted, not quite a smile, but something warmer than his usual controlled neutrality. Emma. He greeted me like we were old friends, kissing both my cheeks in the European style that felt foreign, but not unwelcome. Thank you for coming. I hope the drive wasn't too uncomfortable. Sophia was great, I managed, very reassuring. He shot his cousin an amused look. I'm sure she was. Come, our table is ready. The restaurant interior was all dark wood and soft lighting, with fresh flowers on every table, and the kind of understated elegance that screamed expensive. The hostess led us to a private corner booth, partially screened from the main dining area by frosted glass panels that provided the illusion of privacy without complete isolation. Dante waited until I'd slid into the booth before settling across from me. Up close, in better lighting than Bella Notte ever provided, I could see new details. The faint scar along his jawline that looked old, surgical maybe, the flecks of amber in his dark eyes that caught the light, the way his hands rested on the table, relaxed but ready, like he was never fully at ease. I imagine you have questions, he said, once the waiter had taken our drink orders, sparkling. Water for me, espresso for him. I'll answer what I can. Who was he? I asked immediately. The stalker. Did you find out? Dante's expression darkened. His name is Aaron Mitchell. 37 years old, lives in Pilsen, works as a delivery driver. No criminal record, no history of violence. Which makes him more dangerous, actually. How is that more dangerous? Because men without records are better at hiding what they are. They haven't been caught yet. It means they're careful, patient, good at flying under the radar. He pulled out his phone, showed me a photo, the man from last night, but in a driver's license photo. Smiling at the camera with that same unsettling intensity. We found his apartment. He had photos of you. Dozens of them. Your schedule written out, places you frequent, even sketches he'd made of you sleeping. My stomach turned. How did he get photos of me sleeping? Fire escape outside your bedroom window. Based on the angles he'd been climbing up. There at night, watching you through the glass. Dante's voice had gone flat. Emotionless in that way that made him more frightening than if he'd been angry. That stopped last night. He's been strongly encouraged to relocate to a different state. By morning, he'll be gone from Chicago entirely. I didn't ask what strongly encouraged meant. Didn't want to know the specifics of how Dante had achieved in 12 hours what I'd been unable to accomplish in 2 weeks. What if he comes back? He won't. Absolute certainty. Men like Aaron are cowards at their core. They target women they perceive as alone, vulnerable, with no one to protect them. The moment they realize their target has powerful protection, they lose interest. It's not worth the risk. And if they're not cowards? If they're obsessive enough to take the risk anyway? Dante leaned forward slightly. Then they learn that some risks have permanent consequences. The weight of that statement hung between us. I should have been horrified, should have recognized the implicit threat of violence in his words. Instead, I felt relief so profound it made me dizzy. Thank you, I whispered. I know I keep saying that, but I don't know what else to say. You barely know me, and you've already done more to help than anyone else in my entire life. I'd like to change that, Dante said quietly. The barely knowing you part. If you're willing. Our food arrived: pasta for him, risotto for me, both prepared with the kind of artistry that belonged in museums, rather than on plates. I took a bite and nearly moaned. I'd been living on ramen and day-old bagels from the coffee shop for months. This was food from a different planet. Tell me about yourself, Dante said, watching me eat with something that looked like satisfaction. Beyond the basics I already know. What brought you to Chicago? What are your dreams that working 2 jobs is slowly crushing? The honesty of that last part surprised a laugh out of decided. Me. That obvious? You have the look of someone running on fumes and determination. I recognize it. I wore it myself once, before I inherited my family's business. Business. Such a sanitized word for what I suspected his family actually did. I came to Chicago for college, I said slowly. Art history degree from a community college, because it was all I could afford. Thought maybe I'd work in a museum, or teach, or do something that involved beauty and culture instead of just survival. I poked at my risotto. That was naive. Turns out art history degrees are basically expensive wallpaper. No one's hiring, and the positions that exist require master's degrees and connections I don't have. So you're waitressing, 2 restaurants, rotating shifts. It pays the bills, mostly, sometimes, when tips are good. I took another bite of risotto, savoring it because who knew when I'd eat this well again. My plan was to save enough to go back to school, get certified in something practical. But every time I start building savings, something happens. Medical bill, broken heater, late rent fees. It's like climbing a mountain made of sand. Every step forward, you slide back too. Dante was quiet for a moment, studying me with that intense focus that made me feel simultaneously seen and exposed. "What if you didn't have to choose between survival and dreams?" he asked. "What if someone removed the obstacles keeping you on that mountain?" My chest tightened. "I'm not a charity case. I'm not suggesting you are. I'm asking a hypothetical question. If money wasn't an issue, if survival was handled, what would you do with your life?" The question was so far outside my reality that I almost couldn't process it. What would I do if I wasn't constantly exhausted, if I could actually pursue something beyond paying rent? "I'd go back to school," I said slowly. "But for art restoration this time, not history. I'd learn how to repair paintings, preserve sculptures, bring beautiful things back to life. And maybe eventually I'd work for myself, freelance, travel to different museums and private collections. Be the person they call when something irreplaceable needs saving." "Why restoration specifically?" "Because..." I stopped, surprised by the question. No one had ever asked me that before. Because I like the idea of taking something broken and making it whole again. Of seeing beauty that's been damaged or forgotten and saying, "This matters, this is worth saving." It feels important in a way that just studying art never did. Something shifted in Dante's expression. Not pity exactly, but understanding. Recognition. "Emma," he said carefully, "I'd like to make you an offer. And before you refuse out of pride or fear or whatever instinct makes you want to reject help, I want you to actually consider it." My heart started pounding. "What kind of offer?" "I want to help you go back to school, pay for the certification program, cover your living expenses, so you can quit one or both waitressing jobs, give you the space to actually pursue what you're meant to be doing instead of just surviving." I stared at him. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. We barely know each other. Why would you?" "Because I can," he interrupted. "Because I have resources that mean nothing sitting in accounts, and you have dreams being slowly crushed under the weight of capitalism and poverty and bad luck. Because helping you costs me nothing but gives you everything." "Nothing is free," I said, voice sharper than intended. "Everything comes with strings, with expectations, with debts that get collected eventually." Dante leaned back, and I caught a flicker of something in his expression. Not offense, but acknowledgement, like I'd passed some kind of test. "You're right," he said. "Nothing is free. So let me be transparent about what I'd want in exchange." My stomach nodded. Here it was, the catch, the price that would be too high. "I want your time," Dante continued. 2 evenings a week, dinner together, conversation, getting to know each other without the barrier of you serving me and me being just another customer. "I want the opportunity to be part of your life in a way that matters, not just a wealthy stranger who helped you once." That was not what I'd expected. "That's it? Dinner twice a week?" "That's it. No strings beyond that. No expectations of anything physical or romantic unless it develops naturally and you want it to. Just time. Attention. The chance to know you better." He paused. "And full transparency if at any point you decide you want out, that I'm too much or too dangerous or too whatever. You walk away. The school funding continues regardless. You'll never owe me money. The only thing you'll owe me is honesty about when you want to leave." I absorbed this, turning it over in my mind, looking for the hidden angles. Men didn't offer this kind of help without wanting something. Not in my experience. Not in the world I'd grown up in where every kindness came with invisible price tags. But Dante was watching me with those dark, steady eyes, and I couldn't detect deception, only patience, waiting for me to decide. "Why me?" I asked quietly. "You could help anyone. You probably know dozens of people in worse situations. Why am I worth this investment? Because you saved my linguine from being oversalted 3 months ago," he said, and I must have looked confused because he continued. Your first week serving my table, the kitchen sent out my pasta too bland. You tasted it, I saw you do it in the kitchen, then added salt and pepper yourself before bringing it out. You took a risk, made a decision that could have gotten you in trouble, because you cared about the food being right, about me having a good experience, even though I was just another customer. I barely remembered that. It had seemed insignificant at the time. That told me you're someone who pays attention, Dante continued. Someone who cares about doing things well even when no one's watching. Someone with standards and pride in your work. Those qualities are rare, Emma, and they're worth investing in. My throat felt tight. That's a lot to read into some pasta seasoning. I'm good at reading people. It's how I've survived in my line of work. He folded his hands on the table. So, 2 dinners a week in exchange for funding your education and giving you the space to actually build the life you want. Will you accept? Every practical bone in my body screamed yes. This was an opportunity people like me never got. A chance to escape the cycle of poverty that had been crushing me since childhood. But the part of me that had learned to be cautious, that had watched my mother accept help from men who later used that help as leverage, that part was terrified. Can I think about it? I asked. Not long. Just a day or two to process? Of course. No. Hesitation. No pressure. Take whatever time you need. The offer doesn't expire, and my help with the Stalker situation wasn't conditional on you accepting anything else. Relief flooded through me. He wasn't going to punish me for not immediately agreeing. Wasn't going to withdraw his protection because I needed time to decide. We finished lunch talking about safer topics. His favorite restaurants in Chicago. My terrible apartment. The psychology of why people tipped the way they did. Surface-level conversation that felt surprisingly natural despite the surreal circumstances. When Sophia collected me afterward, Dante walked us to the car, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back. The touch was brief, respectful, but it sent electricity through my nervous system in a way I wasn't prepared for. Think about my offer, he said before I climbed into the Mercedes. And Emma? You're worth investing in. I need you to believe that. I spent the next 2 days in a fog of indecision. On one hand, freedom. Education. A chance to actually build something instead of just surviving. The opportunity to restore beautiful things instead of just serving food to people who barely noticed I existed. On the other hand, Dante Moretti. A man whose world was violence and power and consequences I couldn't fully understand. A man who'd somehow decided I was worth protecting, worth investing in, worth his time and resources. The smart thing would be to refuse. To thank him for dealing with Aaron Mitchell and then extract myself from his orbit before I got pulled too deep into a world I didn't belong in. But when I closed my eyes, I saw his face across that restaurant table. The way he'd listened when I talked about art restoration. The complete absence of judgment when I described my poverty, my struggles, my dreams that felt impossibly distant. You're worth investing in. No one had ever said that to me before. Not my parents who'd been too busy destroying each other to notice. Their daughter. Not my high school guidance counselor who'd suggested vocational training instead of college. Not the professors at community college who'd treated students like me as statistics instead of people. Dante Moretti, organized crime boss, had looked at me and decided I mattered. On the 3rd day, I called the number he'd given me. He answered on the 2nd ring. Emma. I accept, I said before I could talk myself out of it. Your offer. I accept. Silence on the other end. Then, you're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. I heard what might have been a smile in his voice. That's honest. I appreciate that. Sophia will handle the logistics getting you registered for classes, setting up living expenses, whatever you need. And Emma? Yes? Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for being worth trusting, I replied, and realized I meant it. The next 2 weeks transformed my life so completely, I barely recognized it. Sophia helped me register for an art restoration certification program that started in January. We found a studio apartment in a better neighborhood, nothing fancy, but it had working locks and windows that actually kept out the cold, and a bathroom where the water ran clear instead of rust brown. I quit the coffee shop job, kept my shifts at Bella Notte because I wasn't ready to completely abandon the independence of earning my own money, but dropped down to 3 evenings a week instead of 5 brutal doubles. And twice a week, I had dinner with Dante. The first dinner was at that same expensive restaurant. I'd dressed carefully, borrowed a dress from Sophia because I owned nothing appropriate. Dante had smiled when he saw me, stood to pull out my chair, and we'd talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing. Art, Chicago. His daughter, a detail that had surprised me, who was 7 years old and lived primarily with her mother but spent weekends with him. I didn't know you had a daughter, I'd said. Most people don't. I keep her separate from business. Protected. His expression had softened in a way I'd never seen before. Her name is Isabella. She's brilliant and stubborn, and thinks she's going to be a veterinarian when she grows up, even though she cries when she finds dead bugs. The love in his voice when he talked about her had made something in my chest ache. The second dinner was at his home. A penthouse in one of those buildings I'd only ever seen from the outside. All glass and steel and views that made Chicago look like a jewelry box spread out below. He'd actually cooked, moving around the kitchen with confident efficiency while I sat at the island and watched. "You're staring," he'd said without turning around. "You're cooking." I didn't expect that. What did you expect? That I'd have servants do everything? Kind of. He'd laughed, and the sound had transformed his entire face. I like cooking. It's meditative. Everything else in my life requires careful thought, strategy, watching for threats. Cooking is just following a recipe and making something good at the end. We'd eaten on his balcony despite the October cold, wrapped in blankets, watching the city lights flicker like earthbound stars. And for the first time since childhood, I'd felt something I'd almost forgotten existed. Peace. But peace in Dante's world was always temporary. On a Wednesday night, my 3rd week of our arrangement, everything changed. I was working my shift at Bella Notte when the front door opened and 3 men walked in. They weren't dressed for dinner. They wore tactical clothing, moved with military precision, and their eyes scanned the restaurant with the cold assessment of professionals evaluating threats. The lead man's gaze found me immediately. Locked on. "Emma Reyes?" His voice carried across the dining room. Every instinct I had screamed danger. I took a step back, bumping into a table. "Who's asking?" "FBI. We need you to come with us. You're not under arrest, but we have questions about your relationship with Dante Moretti." The restaurant went silent. Mr. Castellano appeared from the back, face pale, hands raised in a placating gesture. "Gentlemen, please, there's no need to disrupt. This doesn't concern you." The agent's attention never left me. "Miss Reyes, you can come willingly or we can make this difficult. Your choice." My phone was in my apron pocket. I could feel it there, heavy with possibility. Dante had given me his direct number. Had told me to call if anything happened, anything at all. But federal agents were standing in front of me, and I had no idea if calling Dante would make this better or catastrophically worse. "Emma." The lead agent stepped closer, and I caught sight of his badge. "Special Agent Marcus Chen, FBI. We're not here to arrest you. We're investigating organized crime activity in Chicago, and your name came up in connection with Dante Moretti. We just need to ask some questions. Am I required to come with you?" "No, but if you refuse, we'll assume you have something to hide. And that assumption will lead to a more formal investigation into your activities, your finances, your immigration status." "I was born in Houston," I interrupted. "I'm a citizen, and I haven't done anything illegal. Then you have nothing to worry about." Agent Chen smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just a few questions. An hour of your time, maybe less. Then you're free to go." Every crime show I'd ever watched screamed that I should refuse, demand a lawyer, not say a single word without legal representation. But I also knew that refusing would look suspicious, would make them think I had something to hide when the truth was simpler and more pathetic. I was a waitress who'd accepted help from a wealthy man who happened to be involved in organized crime. "Okay," I heard myself say. "I'll answer your questions." Mr. Castellano looked stricken. "Emma, you don't have to. It's fine," I interrupted, already untying my apron. "I haven't done anything wrong. I'll be back in an hour." The look on his face told me he didn't believe that timeline. Neither did I. The FBI field office was everything police procedurals had taught me to expect. Fluorescent lighting that made everyone look vaguely ill. Interview rooms with two-way mirrors. Coffee that tasted like despair. They put me in one of those rooms and left me alone for 45 minutes. Classic intimidation tactic. Make the suspect subject. They'd called me Subject Sweat while they prepared their questions. When Agent Chen finally entered with a female partner, Agent Rodriguez, I'd gone through every conversation I'd ever had with Dante. Every dinner, every text message, trying to figure out what could possibly look incriminating. "Thank you for cooperating, Miss Reyes." Agent Chen settled into the chair across from me, folder in hand. "To Gay. This shouldn't take long. Just need to establish some facts." "I'd like a lawyer," I said, the words coming out steadier than I felt. Both agents looked surprised. Agent Rodriguez leaned forward. "You just said you haven't done anything illegal. If that's true, why do you need a lawyer?" "Because TV has taught me that innocent people need lawyers more than guilty ones." Agent Chen actually smiled. "Smart. But here's the thing, if you ask for a lawyer, this conversation ends. Which is your right. But it also means we start looking at you very differently. Start wondering what you're hiding. And our investigation expands accordingly." The threat was clear. Cooperate or face consequences. "What do you want to know?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. "Your relationship with Dante Moretti. How did it start?" I told them. The stalker, Dante's intervention, the offer to help with school in exchange for dinner twice a week. I kept it factual, emotionless, giving them nothing that suggested anything illegal. "And you expect us to believe," Agent Rodriguez said when I finished, "that Dante Moretti, one of the most powerful organized crime figures in Chicago, is funding your education out of the goodness of his heart? For nothing except conversation? Yes. That's not how men like him operate. Then maybe you don't know him as well as you think you do." The words came out sharper than intended. Agent Chen's eyebrows rose. "You're defending him," he observed. "Why?" "Because he's helped me when no one else did. Because he's treated me with more respect in 3 weeks than most men manage in years. Because—" I stopped myself before I could say something stupid. "Because?" Agent Rodriguez prompted. "Because I don't think he's the monster you're trying to make him into." Both agents exchanged glances. Some silent communication I couldn't interpret. "Emma," Agent Chen said, voice gentler now, "we're not trying to make you into a criminal. We're trying to protect you. Men like Dante Moretti are dangerous. They manipulate. They control. They use people and discard them when they're no longer useful. We've seen it happen dozens of times. Young women who think they're special, think they're different, think this man genuinely cares about them, and then something happens. Someone ends up hurt. And by then it's too late." "Is there an actual question in there?" I asked. "Or are you just trying to scare me?" "We're trying to help you," Agent Rodriguez said. "If you're being coerced, if you're afraid of him, if he's threatened you in any way, you can tell us. We can protect you." The irony was almost funny. The FBI wanted to protect me from the man who'd actually protected me from a stalker they hadn't even known about. "I'm not being coerced," I said firmly. "I'm not afraid of Dante. And I haven't witnessed any illegal activity. We have dinner, we talk, that's it. If you're trying to use me to build a case against him, you're wasting your time." Agent Chen studied me for a long moment. Then he slid a photograph across the table. Dante, standing outside what looked like a warehouse, talking to 3 men I didn't recognize. "These men are members of the Russo crime family," Agent Chen said. "Eastern European operation, specializing in weapons trafficking and human smuggling. 2 of them are wanted by Interpol. And this photo was taken last week. So when you say Dante Moretti is just a kind man helping you go to school, understand that we know exactly what he is, what he does, the people he associates with." I stared at the photo. At Dante's face, serious and cold in a way I'd never seen directed at me. "I don't know anything about that," I said quietly. "And I don't want to know. My relationship with him is exactly what I described. If he's involved in criminal activity, he's kept it completely separate from me. For now," Agent Rodriguez said. "But Emma, that separation won't last. Eventually you'll see something, know something, be asked to do something. And when that happens, when you're pulled deeper into his world than you ever intended, we won't be able to help you." The words settled over me like a weighted blanket, suffocating and undeniable. They were right. I knew they were right. This thing with Dante, whatever it was becoming, existed in a bubble that couldn't last. Eventually, his world would collide with mine in ways I couldn't ignore, and then I'd have to choose. "Are we done?" I asked. Agent Chen sighed. For now. But Emma, take my card. He slid it across the table. When, not if. When you need help, call me, day or night. Don't wait until it's too late. I took the card, slipped it into my pocket next to the one Dante had given me. 2 lifelines from 2 different worlds, and I had no idea which one would matter more when everything inevitably fell apart. They drove me back to Bella Notte. The restaurant had closed for the night, but Mr. Castellano sat at the bar waiting, and when I walked through the door, he stood with visible relief. Thank God, I called Dante. He's on his way. You didn't have to do that, I said, exhausted down to my bones. Yes, I did. The FBI taking one of my staff isn't something I handle alone. 10 minutes later, Dante arrived. He walked through the door with controlled urgency, eyes scanning the restaurant until they found me. The expression on his face, relief mixed with something darker, made my chest tighten. Are you all right? He was at my side immediately, hands on my shoulders, turning me slightly to check for injuries I didn't have. Did they hurt you? I'm fine. They just asked questions. What kind of questions? I told him. The whole interrogation, every question, every veiled threat. Dante's expression grew progressively darker as I spoke, jaw tightening, hands curling into fists at his sides. They had no right, he said when I finished. You're not part of my business. You've never been present during any meetings, never witnessed anything illegal, never been asked to do anything questionable. They're fishing, hoping to scare you into becoming an informant. Is that what they were doing? The realization made my stomach turn. Trying to recruit me? Yes. He took my hands, and I realized they were shaking. Emma, I need you to understand something. The FBI has been investigating me for years. They have nothing. No evidence, no witnesses willing to testify, no paper trail connecting me to anything illegal. They're desperate. And desperate people make dangerous moves. Like using me. Exactly like using you. His grip tightened fractionally. Which is why I'm going to ask you something difficult. And I need you to think carefully before answering. My heart started pounding. What? Do you want out? Dante asked quietly. This offer, this arrangement, it's putting you in a position I never intended, making you a target for federal investigation. If you want to walk away, I'll understand. The school funding continues, regardless, but I'll step back from your life completely. You'll be safe from this. He was giving me an exit, clean and clear. No guilt, no pressure, no strings. I should take it. Should thank him for everything, and extract myself from this situation before it got worse. Before the FBI pressure escalated. Before I was pulled so deep into Dante's world that I couldn't find my way back out. But when I looked at his face, I saw genuine concern. Not for himself, not for his business or reputation. For me, for my safety and well-being and future. And I realized something that probably made me foolish, naive, dangerously stupid. I didn't want out. No, I said. I don't want to walk away. Something shifted in his expression. Emma, I'm not blind to what you are, I interrupted. The FBI made sure I understood exactly who I'm having dinner with twice a week. But Dante, you've treated me better in 3 weeks than most people have in my entire life. You've helped me without asking for anything I wasn't willing to give. You've been honest about the dangers, given me choices, respected my boundaries. I squeezed his hands. So no, I don't want out. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. Keep me separate from your business. Whatever you do, whoever you meet with, whatever happens in that part of your life, I don't want to know. I can't know, because if I know, if I witness something, then the FBI is right. I become complicit, and I'm not strong enough to lie to federal agents about actual crimes. Dante studied my face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I promise, he said. You'll never be present during business meetings. Never be asked to witness or participate in anything questionable. The only part of my life you'll see is the part that's just me. The father, the man who likes cooking, the person who enjoys art history, debates with someone who actually knows what they're talking about. Can you really separate those things? I asked, quietly. Are you able to be 2 different people? I've been doing it for years with Isabella. She knows I have a business, that I travel sometimes, that people treat me with a certain level of respect, but she's never seen the violence, never witnessed anything that would frighten her. I can do the same for you. It should have been impossible. But looking at the absolute certainty in his eyes, I believed him. Okay, I said. Then we continue. Dinners twice a week, conversation, getting to know each other, and whatever happens with the FBI, we handle it together. Dante pulled me into a hug, so suddenly I didn't have time to brace for it. Just found myself wrapped in expensive fabric and body heat, and the scent of cologne I was starting to associate with safety. Thank you, he murmured against my hair, for trusting me enough to stay. I held on to him and tried not to think about Agent Chen's warning. About how women who thought they were special always ended up hurt. About how this couldn't possibly end well. But in that moment, standing in a closed Italian restaurant with a mafia boss's arms around me, I decided that maybe some risks were worth taking. Even the dangerous ones. Especially the dangerous ones. The weeks that followed the FBI interrogation fell into a rhythm that felt both surreal and surprisingly normal. I started my art restoration classes in January. The program was intensive, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, learning the delicate chemistry of cleaning centuries-old paint, the physics of structural repair, the history required to authenticate and contextualize damaged pieces. I loved every exhausting minute of it. My new apartment became a sanctuary. Small but mine, with locks that worked, and neighbors who nodded politely in hallways instead of screaming through walls at 3 a.m. I kept working at Bella Notte 3 nights a week, partly because I needed the independence of earning my own money, partly because it kept me connected to something that existed outside Dante's orbit. And twice a week, I had dinner with him. We alternated locations. Sometimes his penthouse, where he cooked elaborate Italian meals, and I pretended I understood wine pairings. Sometimes restaurants where maitre d's greeted him by name, and somehow always had tables available despite month-long wait lists. Once, memorably, a late-night diner at 2 a.m. After I'd finished a particularly brutal shift and he'd insisted I needed real food, not the protein bar I'd planned to eat standing over my kitchen sink. The FBI checked in periodically. Agent Chen called every few weeks, asking if I'd witnessed anything, learned anything, changed my mind about cooperating. I gave him the same answer every time. No. I hadn't seen anything illegal. Dante kept his business completely separate from me. I had nothing to report. I could hear the frustration in Chen's voice each time. But I also heard something else concern, genuine worry that I was getting in too deep, that by the time I realized the danger I was in, it would be too late to escape. Maybe he was right. Because somewhere between January and March, between dinners and conversations, and the way Dante listened when I talked about my classes, like what I had to say actually mattered, I'd stopped being able to imagine my life without him in it. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something deeper than gratitude. More dangerous than friendship. It was the feeling of being seen by someone who paid attention to details everyone else missed, who remembered that I liked my coffee with too much sugar and not enough cream, who bought me art restoration textbooks I'd mentioned wanting but couldn't afford, who asked about my day and actually listened to the answer instead of waiting for his turn to talk. "You're falling for him," Sophia observed one afternoon in early March. We were having coffee at a cafe near my apartment, and she'd been watching me with that knowing expression for 20 minutes. "I'm not," I protested automatically. "Emma, I've known Dante my entire life. I've never seen him like this with anyone. The way he talks about you, the way his face changes when your name comes up, this is serious for him. And I think it's serious for you too, even if you're not ready to admit it." I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug, needing the warmth. "It's complicated. Of course it's complicated. He's Dante Moretti. Complicated is his default setting." She leaned forward. "But that doesn't mean it's not real, or that it's not worth pursuing. The FBI thinks I'm making a terrible mistake. The FBI doesn't know him the way you do. They see the criminal, the threat, the man who operates outside their control." Sophia's voice softened. "You see the person underneath. The father who reads bedtime stories to his daughter. The man who learned to cook because it was the only way he could feel in control after his wife died. The person who's spent 3 years trying to atone for not protecting his sister when she needed him most. He told you about that? He tells me everything eventually. We're family." She smiled. "And Emma, he's told me more about you in 3 months than he's shared about anyone in years. That means something." It did mean something. I knew it did, but knowing and accepting were different territories, and I wasn't sure I was ready to cross that border yet. That night, I had dinner with Dante at his penthouse. He'd promised homemade gnocchi, and I'd brought a bottle of wine that Sophia had helped me pick out something Italian and expensive that I'd been assured would pair well with the meal. When I arrived, though, something was different. Dante opened the door, looking exhausted. Not physically tired, but emotionally drained in a way I'd never seen before. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. "Bad day?" I asked, stepping inside. "Difficult conversation with Isabella's mother." He closed the door, ran a hand over his face. "She wants to move to California. Take Isabella with her. Permanently." My chest tightened. "Can she do that? Legally?" "Yes. We have joint custody, but her career is there, her family. The judge would probably approve it." He moved toward the kitchen, movements mechanical. I'd see my daughter on holidays and summer breaks. Video calls in between. She'd grow up 3,000 miles away. I'd never heard this much pain in his voice before. Dante was always controlled, composed, presenting a version of himself that was unshakable. This was different. This was raw. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, following him. "That's impossible. Having to choose between what's best for her and what you want. I don't even know if it is what's best for her." He stared at the pasta ingredients laid out on the counter like he'd forgotten what they were for. "Maybe she'd be better off away from Chicago, away from me, away from the life I lead here." "Don't do that." He looked up, surprised. "Don't talk about yourself like you're poison," I said firmly. "You're her father. You love her. That matters more than geography or the complicated parts of your life. Isabella needs you, regardless of which state she lives in." Something shifted in his expression. "You really believe that?" "I know what it's like to grow up without a parent who gives a damn. My father left when I was 8. Just decided one day that his new family was more important than the old one. I spent my entire childhood wondering what was wrong with me, what I'd done to make him leave." I moved closer, placed my hand over his on the counter. "Don't let Isabella grow up wondering that. Whatever you and her mother decide, make sure your daughter knows she's loved. That you staying here or her going there isn't because you chose something over her." Dante turned his hand over, lacing his leg, fingers through mine. "How did you get so wise?" "Trauma and therapy I couldn't afford but got anyway through a community health program." I squeezed his hand. "Come on, teach me how to make gnocchi. I'll be terrible at it. You'll be distracted by correcting my technique, and by the end we'll both feel better." He smiled, then genuine and warm, and transforming his entire face in that way that made my heart do complicated things I wasn't ready to name. "Okay," he agreed. "But if you make them wrong, we're ordering takeout." I made them catastrophically wrong. The dough was too sticky, then too dry, then somehow both simultaneously. I got flour everywhere, counter, floor, my hair, Dante's shirt when I accidentally flung a particularly rebellious piece of dough at him. He laughed. Actually laughed, the sound filling the kitchen with something light and genuine. And I realized I'd never heard him laugh before. Not like this, unguarded and free. We ended up ordering takeout, Thai, food eaten straight from containers while sitting on his balcony despite the March cold, wrapped in blankets and watching Chicago's lights glitter below. "Thank you," Dante said after a long, comfortable silence. "For destroying your gnocchi attempt? For being here? For knowing what to say when I didn't know how to ask for it?" He shifted to look at me, and the intensity in his dark eyes made my breath catch. "Emma, these past 3 months with you have been significant. For me, in ways I didn't anticipate." My heart started pounding. "Significant how?" "I think you know how." He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, the gesture achingly gentle. "I think you've known for a while now. Just like I've known." "Dante, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give," he interrupted softly. "I just need you to know that this stopped being an arrangement a long time ago. Stopped being about repaying debt or protecting you out of guilt. Somewhere between dinners and conversations and watching you light up when you talk about art restoration, this became about you. About wanting you in my life, not because I should, but because I can't imagine it without you anymore." The honesty of that statement made my eyes sting. "The FBI says you're dangerous. I am dangerous. To people who threaten what's mine, who cross lines that shouldn't be crossed. But Emma," his hand cupped my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone, "I would never hurt you, Never control you. Never make you smaller to make myself feel bigger. You have to know that by now. I did know it. Had known it for weeks, maybe months. Known it in the way he always asked instead of demanded. The way he gave me space when I needed it. The way he'd kept his promise about separating his business from my life. I'd never seen him conduct anything illegal. Never been asked to compromise my ethics. Never felt trapped by his protection. I know, I whispered. And that's what terrifies me. Why? Because if you were like Tyler, like every other man who's tried to control me, I'd know how to leave. I'd recognize the danger and run. But you're not like them. You're careful and patient, and you actually listen when I talk. And that makes you so much more dangerous because I don't want to run. I want to stay. And staying feels like the biggest risk I've ever taken. Dante's thumb traced my jaw, the touch reverent. What if I promised to make it worth the risk? You can't promise that. Your world is violence and federal investigations and enemies who would use me to hurt you. Agent Chen was right about that part. Eventually, someone is going to see me as leverage. Then I'll make sure that leverage is worthless. His voice dropped, taking on an edge I rarely heard. Anyone who touches you, who threatens you, who even thinks about using you against me, they'll learn that some prices are too high to pay. The fierce protectiveness in his tone should have frightened me. Instead, it made me feel safe in a way I'd never experienced before. Emma, Dante said quietly, I'm going to kiss you now. If you don't want me to, if this is moving too fast or feels like too much, tell me to stop. I didn't tell him to stop. His lips met mine with a gentleness that contradicted everything I knew about him. Soft, questioning, giving me every opportunity to pull away. When I didn't, when I leaned into him instead, hands fisting in his shirt, the kiss deepened. Became something hungry and desperate and tinged with the knowledge that we were crossing a line that would change everything. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against mine. Stay, he whispered. Not just tonight. Stay in my life, in this thing we're building. Despite the risks and complications and everything that makes this inadvisable. Stay because you want to, because this matters, because walking away would hurt more than staying. I thought about my apartment with its working locks. My art restoration classes that would lead to a career I'd only dreamed about. The independence I'd fought so hard to build. All of it made possible by this man who'd stepped into my life and decided I was worth investing in. I thought about Agent Chen's warnings, about Sophia's observations, about the way my heart had started recognizing Dante's presence before my eyes did, the way my days felt incomplete without knowing I'd see him soon. And I made a choice. Okay, I said. I'll stay. Spring arrived in Chicago with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been locked inside all winter. Trees budded overnight. Flowers appeared in planters along Michigan Avenue. People emerged from their apartments pale and blinking, like creatures awakening from hibernation. My relationship with Dante shifted after that night on his balcony. We were still careful, still kept his business completely separate from my life, still maintained the boundaries that kept me safe from FBI scrutiny. But the emotional distance we'd preserved evaporated. I spent more nights at his penthouse. Not every night, because I needed my own space, needed to maintain some independence. But enough that I kept a drawer of clothes there, a toothbrush in his bathroom, art history books stacked on his nightstand. Isabella came for her weekend visits, and Dante introduced us carefully. This is my friend Emma, he'd said that first meeting. She's studying to fix broken paintings. Isabella, 7 years old with her father's dark eyes and a gap-toothed smile, had studied me seriously. Are you Daddy's girlfriend? I'd looked at Dante, unsure how to answer. He'd given the slightest nod permission to tell the truth. Yes, I'd said. I am. Good. He smiles more when he talks about you. I like when he smiles. Those words had settled into my chest and stayed there. He smiles more when he talks about you. The FBI stopped calling as frequently. Either they'd given up on recruiting me as an informant, or they were watching from a distance, waiting for me to slip up. I tried not to think about it too much. Tried to focus on my classes, my work at Bella Notte, the life I was building that felt increasingly real and solid. But peace in Dante's world was always temporary. The first crack appeared in late April. I was at his penthouse, studying for an exam on Renaissance fresco restoration techniques, when his phone rang with a tone I'd never heard before. Not his usual ringtone, but something harsher, more urgent. Dante's expression changed instantly. He answered in Italian, spoke rapidly for 30 seconds, then ended the call and stood. "I have to go," he said, already moving toward his bedroom. "Business emergency. Marco will drive you home." "Is everything okay?" "It will be." He reappeared with a jacket, and I caught a glimpse of the shoulder holster underneath. The gun he never wore around me but apparently always had nearby. "Emma, don't wait. Up. This might take all night." He kissed me quickly, too quickly, distracted, his mind already wherever he needed to be, and then he was gone. I sat alone in his penthouse, staring at my textbook without seeing the words. Business emergency. What did that mean in his world? Who was in danger? Was he in danger? My phone buzzed. Text from a number I didn't recognize. "Your boyfriend is meeting with the Kozlov brothers tonight, Eastern European arms dealers. If you care about him staying alive, you'll convince him to walk away from whatever deal they're proposing. These men don't negotiate. They eliminate competition." My blood went cold. I stared at the message, fingers trembling around my phone. Another text. "This is Agent Chen. I'm trying to help. That meeting is going to end badly. Get him out." How did the FBI know about Dante's meeting? Were they watching him right now? Were they planning to raid wherever he was going? I called Dante. It went straight to voicemail. Texted. "FBI. Knows about your meeting tonight. Says it's dangerous. Please be careful." No response. I paced the penthouse for an hour, stomach churning, imagining every possible worst-case scenario. Dante arrested. Dante shot. Dante bleeding out in some warehouse while I sat safe in his apartment doing nothing. Finally, I did something probably stupid and definitely inadvisable. I called Sophia. "Emma? It's midnight. What's wrong?" Dante had a business emergency. He left hours ago. The FBI just texted me saying his meeting tonight is with dangerous people, that he needs to walk away. I can't reach him and I don't know what to do. Silence on the other end. Then, where are you? His penthouse. Stay there. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone except Dante or me. I'm calling our cousins. We'll handle this. Sophia, I don't even know where he is. I do. Family always knows. Emma, listen to me carefully. Do not try to go after him. Do not involve yourself in this. You stay safe. We'll bring him home. Understood? It went against every instinct I had. But I also knew I'd be useless in whatever situation Dante had walked into. Worse than useless, I'd be a liability he'd have to protect instead of focusing on protecting himself. Understood, I whispered. Good. I'll call you as soon as I know anything. She hung up. I stood in the middle of Dante's living room, feeling helpless and terrified and furious at my own uselessness. 3 hours passed. The longest 3 hours of my life. At 3:47 a.m., the penthouse door opened. I spun around, heart in my throat, and there was Dante. Alive, whole. But something was wrong. His jacket was torn. Blood on his shirt, not his blood. I realized after a panicked assessment. But someone's. His face was cold, expressionless in that way that meant he'd done things tonight he didn't want to talk about. You're okay, I breathed, moving toward him. He held up a hand, stopping me. Don't. Not yet. I need to shower. Need to... His voice cracked slightly. Give me 15 minutes. He disappeared into the bathroom. I heard water running, heard the shower turn on and stay on for 20 minutes instead of 15. When he finally emerged, hair wet, wearing clean clothes, he looked more human. Still exhausted, still carrying whatever weight he'd accumulated tonight, but present in a way he hadn't been when he'd first arrived. The FBI contacted you, he said, settling onto the couch. Not a question. Agent Chen texted. Said you were meeting with arms dealers, that it was dangerous, that I should get you to walk away. I sat beside him, keeping some distance because I couldn't read whether he wanted comfort or space. I called Sophia. She said she'd handle it. She did. Brought half our family as backup, which turned out to be necessary. Dante leaned back, closed his eyes. The Kozlov brothers tried to strong-arm me into giving them access to shipping routes I control. When I refused, they made threats. Against my business. Against people I care about. His eyes opened, found mine. Against you. My stomach dropped. Me? They'd been watching. Saw us together. Decided you were leverage they could use. His jaw tightened. They were wrong. Very wrong. But the fact that they tried, that they even considered targeting you, means the separation I've maintained isn't as effective as I thought. What happened? At the meeting? Emma. I'm not asking for details about whatever illegal business was being discussed. I'm asking if you're okay. If we're safe. If those men are still a threat. Dante studied me for a long moment. Then, they're not a threat anymore. Won't be a threat to anyone again. But Emma, this is exactly what I tried to protect you from. The reality of what my world looks like when diplomacy fails. The violence that I promised you'd never have to witness, but that exists nonetheless. I know what you are, I said quietly. I've always known. You've never lied about that. And Dante, I'm not so naive that I thought your business was entirely negotiation and civilized disagreement. I know that sometimes situations escalate, that you exist in a world where violence is a tool, not an aberration. Knowing it intellectually and confronting it directly are different things. Yes, but I'm still here, aren't I? Still choosing to be with you despite knowing? I moved closer, took his hand. What I need to know is, are we safe? Is Isabella safe? Because if the answer is no, if being with you puts your daughter in danger, then we need to have a very different conversation. Isabella is always safe. I have protocols in place, security at her school, her mother's home, everywhere she goes. No one touches her, ever. His grip tightened on my hand. And you're safe. After tonight, word will spread about what happens to people who threaten mine. It'll be a long time before anyone's stupid enough to try again. The certainty in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it made me feel protected in that primal way I'd come to associate with Dante. He didn't make empty promises. When he said I was safe, he meant it with every resource at his disposal. Okay, I said. Then we move forward. Just like that? Just like that. I shifted closer, rested my head on his shoulder. But Dante, I need you to promise me something. Anything. If there's ever a situation where being with me puts Isabella at risk, you tell me. Immediately. Not later. Not when you've handled it. Not after the crisis passes. Right away. Because she comes first. Always. That's non-negotiable. He turned, cupped my face in both hands, and the look in his eyes was so intense it made my breath catch. The fact that you said that, he said quietly, the fact that your first concern is my daughter's safety over your own feelings, Emma. Do you have any idea what that means to me? That I understand what matters? That you're exactly the kind of person I hoped you were? He kissed me then, deep and grateful, and tinged with the desperation of someone who'd spent the night facing mortality and come home to find what mattered most still waiting. When we broke apart, I said, Agent Chen was trying to protect you, by warning me. I know. That means he still thinks I can be turned. That eventually I'll see something I can't ignore, and I'll cooperate with their investigation. Will you? Dante asked. No judgment. No threat. Just genuine curiosity about what I'd choose. I thought about it honestly. I don't know. If I witnessed something truly terrible, human trafficking, murder, something I couldn't rationalize or compartmentalize, I don't know if I could stay silent. But Dante, you've kept your promise. You've kept me completely separate from that side of your life. I haven't seen anything illegal. Just a man who sometimes has late-night meetings and comes home looking like he's seen things I don't want to imagine. That's all you'll ever see, he promised. I swear it. We stayed on the couch until dawn, painted the windows gold. Talked about nothing and everything. His fears about Isabella moving to California. My anxiety about upcoming exams. The mundane concerns of normal people living complicated lives. And for a few hours, we almost believed we could be normal. 2 weeks later, everything fell apart. I was at Bella Notte, finishing my Thursday evening shift, when 3 black SUVs pulled up outside. Not unusual in this neighborhood, lots of expensive cars, lots of people who drove them, but something about the synchronized arrival made my skin prickle. Men emerged, dark suits, moving with purpose, and leading them was Agent Chen. He walked straight to my section, where I was clearing the last table of the night. Emma Reyes, you need to come with us. My heart dropped. Am I under arrest? Not yet, but Dante Moretti is, and you're being brought in for questioning as a potential accessory. The restaurant went silent. Mr. Castellano appeared, face pale. What's the charge? racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, and about 15 other federal crimes we've been building a case on for 3 years. Agent Chen's expression was grim. We finally have a witness willing to testify. Someone inside Moretti's organization who's been documenting everything, and Miss Reyes' phone number appears in evidence we recovered. Text messages discussing meetings, locations, times. She's implicated whether she intended to be or not. That's impossible, I breathed. I don't know anything about his business. He kept me completely separate. Then you'll have nothing to worry about when you explain that during official questioning. Agent Chen gestured toward the door. Let's go. They drove me to the FBI field office, put me in the same interrogation room as before, but this time, Agent Rodriguez looked almost sympathetic when she entered. We arrested Dante Moretti 2 hours ago, she said without preamble. Found him at his penthouse. He's being held without bail pending trial. And Emma, I need you to understand how serious this is. The evidence we have is substantial. Financial records, recorded conversations, testimony from a family insider. He's looking at life in prison. Possibly multiple life sentences. My vision tunneled. Life in prison. Dante would spend the rest of his life in a cage, and Isabella would grow up visiting her father behind glass. And I would, where do I fit into this? I managed. We recovered text messages between your phone and a burner phone we've identified as belonging to Moretti. Conversations that reference meetings, timing, locations. On their own, they're not illegal, but combined with other evidence, they suggest you were aware of his criminal activities, that you were providing him information, maybe even helping coordinate meetings. That's insane! We texted about dinner plans, about when I'd see him, normal relationship things. Show us. Agent Chen slid a phone across the table. My phone. I realized with a jolt. They'd confiscated it from my purse. Unlock it. Show us these innocent conversations. My hands shook as I entered my passcode. Pulled up my text thread with Dante. It wasn't what I remembered. The messages I'd sent normal, innocuous things about dinner times and whether I'd stay over were there. But interspersed between them were other messages. Texts I'd never written. Discussing business meetings. Confirming locations. Passing along information about police movements. I didn't write these, I said, panic rising in my chest. Someone altered my phone, put these messages here. I never sent this. That's what they all say. Agent Rodriguez didn't sound cruel, just tired. But Emma, the metadata confirms these texts were sent from your device. Your number. At times you were provably alone with your phone. There's no evidence of hacking or tampering. Then your evidence is wrong. Or fabricated. Or, I stopped. Looked at the messages again. Really looked at them. They were too perfect. Too incriminating. Like someone had written exactly what federal prosecutors would need to establish my knowledge of Dante's criminal activities. This is a setup, I said slowly. Someone with access to Dante's organization and my phone is framing us both, making it look like I was involved when I wasn't. Making it look like he was sloppy enough to text about illegal activities when he never did that. Both agents exchanged glances. Who would benefit from framing both of you? Agent Chen asked. I thought about it. Thought about who had access to Dante's business, who knew about me, who might want him arrested and me implicated. And then it hit me. The witness, I said. The insider who's testifying against him. Who is it? We can't disclose that. It's someone close to him. Someone with access to his communications, his phones, his meetings. Someone who knew about me and decided I was a convenient person to throw under the bus. My mind raced. And I'm betting it's someone who approached you, not the other way around. Someone who came to you with evidence, maybe even helped you build the case by documenting things they knew would look damning. Agent Chen's expression had gone very still. What if your witness isn't a reformed criminal trying to do the right thing? I continued, voice gaining strength. What if there's someone who wants Dante out of the way so they can take over his territory? And they're using you to eliminate their competition while making sure his closest allies like me are either in prison or too discredited to carry on his business? That's a compelling theory, Agent Rodriguez said carefully, but without proof. Then let me talk to him. To Dante. Under supervision, on camera, whatever you need. Because if someone's framing both of us, he'll know. Who? He'll have suspected, even if he couldn't prove it. Let me talk to him. Both agents looked at each other, some silent communication I couldn't interpret. You understand, Agent Chen said slowly, that anything you say to Dante Moretti, anything he says to you, will be recorded and can be used as evidence. If he confesses to crimes, if you confess to crimes, there's no taking it back. I understand. But I also understand that an innocent woman is about to go to prison because someone very clever is manipulating your investigation. So either you let me try to figure out who, or you charge me with crimes I didn't commit, and hope your case is stronger than I think it is. It was a gamble. Calling their bluff. Betting that they had doubts about their evidence. That somewhere in the back of their minds, they recognized this was too convenient, too perfect. Agent Chen stood. Wait here. They left me alone for 40 minutes. Longest 40 minutes of my life. When they returned, Agent Rodriguez said, "You have 15 minutes. Supervised. Recorded. And Emma, if you're wrong about this, if you really were involved, this conversation will be the evidence that puts you away. I'll take that risk." They brought me to a different room. Smaller, with a table bolted to the floor and chairs that looked designed for maximum discomfort. A camera in the corner, red light blinking. Recording everything. Dante sat on the other side of the table, hands cuffed in front of him. He looked exhausted, furious, and when he saw me, something in his expression broke. "Emma, someone's framing us," I interrupted, "setting us both up. They've altered my phone to make it look like I was helping you coordinate illegal activities. And they're testifying against you, while making sure anyone who might defend you is either in custody or too compromised to be credible." Dante's eyes sharpened. "What exactly do the messages say?" I recited them from memory, watched his expression grow darker with each one. "I never sent you those." I finished. "Never wrote them, never knew about the meetings they reference. Someone with access to your communications and my phone put them there. Not just someone," Dante said quietly. "Someone smart enough to know exactly what law enforcement would need. Someone who's been documenting my activities for months, maybe years. Someone I trusted." "Who?" He was silent for a long moment. Then, "Michael. My attorney. He's the only person who had access to both my business communications and enough information about you to make the framing convincing." My stomach turned. "Your attorney is the one testifying against you? Makes sense, doesn't it? He's been pushing me to expand into territories I didn't want, business relationships I didn't trust. When I refused, when I started pulling back from certain activities to keep you and Isabella safe, he must have decided I was more valuable removed." Dante's jaw tightened. "And framing, you ensures that even if I beat the charges, I'm isolated. Everyone will think you betrayed me, that our relationship was just you gathering evidence. But I didn't. I would never, I know." His voice was soft, certain. "Emma, I know. But perception is reality in my world. Michael's counting on that." I turned to the camera. "You're recording this. You heard him. Your witness is Michael Torres, Dante's attorney. And he's not a reformed criminal trying to help you. He's someone who wants Dante eliminated so he can take over his operations." Silence. Then Agent Chen's voice over a speaker. "What proof do you have?" "Check his finances," Dante said. "Michael's been positioning himself to take over my shipping routes, my business relationships. He's made contacts with people I refused to work with, people I knew were too violent, too unstable. You'll find communications, money transfers, meetings he thought I didn't know about. And the phone tampering?" I added. "Check when. Those messages were supposedly sent from my device against when I was provably somewhere else. Cross-reference timestamps with security footage from my apartment building, my school, Bella Notte. I'm betting you'll find discrepancies." Another long silence. Then Agent Rodriguez entered the room. "We're looking into it. Both of you stay here while we verify." They left us alone, supervised but alone, with just the camera recording and 15 minutes that had somehow stretched into an hour. "I'm sorry," Dante said quietly. "I promised you'd never be pulled into this, that my world would stay separate from yours. And now you're in an FBI interrogation room facing federal charges because I didn't see the betrayal coming. You couldn't have known. I should have. Should have recognized that Michael was too eager, too pushing. Should have realized that pulling back from business to protect you would make me look weak to people who measure strength in territory and violence. leaned forward as far as the cuffs allowed. Emma, if they charge you, if this goes to trial, I'll make sure you have the best attorneys money can buy. I'll take responsibility for everything. Testify that you knew nothing. Make it clear you were an innocent party who was never privy to my business. Stop talking like that, like you're already convicted. I reached across the table, took his cuffed hands in mine. We're going to prove Michael set us up. We're going to show the FBI they've been manipulated. And then we're going to figure out what comes next. And if we can't prove it, then I guess we'll both learn what prison food tastes like. I tried to smile. Failed. But Dante, I need you to know something. Even if this ends badly, even if Michael wins and we both end up convicted, I don't regret this. Don't regret choosing you, trusting you, building something with you. You gave me back my life when I'd forgotten what living felt like. That matters more than whatever happens next. Something in his expression cracked. I love you. I don't know if this is the right time to say it, if I've earned the right to say it, but Emma, I love you. You're the best thing that's happened to me in years, and the thought of you paying the price for my mistakes. I love you too, I interrupted. And we're going to get through this. Together. The door opened. Agent Chen stood there, expression unreadable. We checked Michael Torres's financials, he said. Found offshore accounts we didn't know about. Communications with known criminals Moretti refused to work with. And the phone metadata shows discrepancies. Messages supposedly sent from Emma's device at times when building security footage shows her entering or leaving her apartment, when the phone would have been in her purse and impossible to use. Relief flooded through me so intensely I felt dizzy. Michael Torres is being picked up for questioning now. Agent Chen continued. And both of you, he paused. You're free to go. Charges dropped pending further investigation. But Moretti, understand that this doesn't mean you're in the clear. We're still building a case against you. Still watching. And eventually, you will make a mistake. Then I'll try very hard not to make mistakes, Dante said, standing. Can you remove the cuffs now? Agent Rodriguez uncuffed him. Dante rubbed his wrists, then immediately reached for me, pulling me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. We should go, he murmured against my hair. Before they changed their minds, we walked out of the FBI field office together. Found Marco waiting with the Mercedes, looking stressed but relieved when he saw us. The drive back to Dante's penthouse was silent, both of us processing what had just happened, how close we'd come to losing everything. When we finally made it inside, the sun was rising over Chicago, painting the city in shades of gold and pink that felt impossibly beautiful after the night we'd just survived. Michael's been arrested, Sophia called with an update an hour later. Confessed to everything. Setting you up, framing Emma, planning to take over your territory. The FBI has enough evidence now to drop their investigation into both of you. You're clear. Dante thanked her, ended the call, and turned to me. It's over, he said. Actually over. For now, I agreed. Until the next crisis, the next threat, the next person who decides we're obstacles to remove. Are you saying you want out? He asked it carefully, giving me room to choose differently now that we'd both seen exactly how bad things could get. I thought about it. Really thought about it. About Agent Chen's warnings. About the reality of loving someone who lived in a world of constant danger. About how this wouldn't be the last time we faced something like this. And I thought about Dante's face when he'd seen me in that interrogation room. About the way he'd immediately prioritized my protection over his own. About morning coffee on his balcony, and the way Isabella smiled when he read her bedtime stories. About art restoration classes I loved, and the future I was building with his support. No, I said. I'm not saying I want out. I'm saying I understand the risks now, really understand them, and I'm choosing to stay anyway. Because Dante, whatever happens next, I want to face it with you. He crossed the space between us, cupped my face in both hands, and kissed me with the desperate relief of someone who'd been prepared to lose everything and found out they got to keep it instead. Then we face it together, he said. Whatever comes, however complicated, we face it together. 6 months later, I graduated from my art restoration program. Top of my class, job offers from 3 museums, and a freelance business already building momentum. Isabella and her mother decided to stay in Chicago. Joint custody arrangement that gave Dante regular time with his daughter while giving her mother the career opportunities she needed. It wasn't perfect, but it was workable. The FBI investigation had officially closed. Michael Torres was serving 15 years for conspiracy, fraud, and about a dozen other charges. Agent Chen still checked in occasionally, still seemed to expect me to eventually see something I couldn't ignore, but he was wrong. Dante had kept his promise. I never witnessed his business, never saw violence, never had to choose between love and ethics. I moved into the penthouse officially. Kept my own apartment for another 6 months because I needed to know I could leave if I wanted to. But eventually I gave up the lease, admitted that I was building a life with Dante that didn't include escape routes. We weren't engaged, weren't married. Just two people who'd found each other in impossible circumstances and decided that impossible was worth fighting for. Happy? Dante asked one evening. We were on the balcony again, watching Chicago light up as dusk fell. Isabella was asleep in the guest room. Sophia was bringing wine later. And for the moment, everything was peaceful. Yeah, I said, leaning into him. Despite everything, despite the danger and complications, and the fact that we probably shouldn't work at all, I'm happy. Good. He kissed the top of my head. Because I plan to keep making you happy for a very long time. It wasn't a proposal. Wasn't a promise of marriage or conventional, happily ever after. But it was real. Honest. Built on a foundation of choice and trust, and the kind of love that survived FBI interrogations and federal charges and betrayal from people who should have been allies. And for people like us, for a waitress and a mafia boss who'd built something improbable from nothing, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.